Ben Cusack here from Bullet Point, just talking about the R&D tax incentive and the ATO's requirement for timekeeping. Let's have a look at some of the options you have for recording your time. So the main cost that companies are going to have for their R&D is staff time. So if we look at what the ATO want regards to salary expenditure, they say the most accurate and effective method of allocating time is to maintain timesheets, but they also say that it may not always be practical for you to retain timesheets. So basically what they're saying is that you need to keep timesheets, but we understand that it's not absolute. So it may be unreasonable to keep detailed timesheets for staff. So while they're not mandating it, if they came and asked you, show me your evidence to support your time, you need to have very good records to support that. And in essence, timesheets is the best mechanism to do that. So I consider probably a poor timesheet, but it's a timesheet nonetheless. So here we have the person's name, we have the fact that there's their job title, and we've got the months, we've got the number of total days available to work during that month, and then we've allocated how many R&D days that they have undertaken, and there's the percent of their time. So a quick description about their R&D. Now, this is probably not the best form of record keeping. So it only records the general nature of R&D. The description of R&D is not actually detailed, and the activities are not linked to the supporting or core activities. So I would only use this as a secondary form of evidence if you've got stronger evidence elsewhere that you can get if required. So here's another way that you could do it is in your assumptions. So you have the number of working days in the year, that's the same. And then you actually put in your R&D activity. So what is a core and what is supporting, and then a bit more description about that. Now this can happen at the end of the year. That's fine. And then we have the staff name and what their title is. So having their title and a job description helps inform more about, I guess, how much time they should be on R&D. If their title was salesperson, then you're not going to be expecting 90% of their time is going to be on R&D. But if their title was R&D manager and the job description says they're always doing R&D, you'd expect, or it'd be reasonable to assume that 90% of their time is on R&D. We just need to be able to support it. So another way to look at doing timesheets is, once again, by the month, how many hours, and then allocating that time over core and supporting activities. That's getting better, but it lacks detail about what specifically was done. You're just sort of spreading the hours over a greater sort of allocation of core and supporting. So what we want is more the detailed activity of what was going on. So once again, if you've got stronger forms of timesheets that you could go and look into and find this information, that's good. This is more of a summary. What I consider a great timekeeping method is, let's look at a week. So the ATO want contemporaneous records. So that means records kept at the time and recorded at the time. Really, they want daily timesheets, but here is one if you did on a weekly basis. So 1st of July to the 5th of July, that's 1 week. And they had 28 hours of R&D and 10 hours of other. And then we had a detailed description of what they actually underdid, or what they did. And so there we are for the whole year. At the end of the week, someone goes and fills in their time, looks at what they did that week. That's contemporaneous. So the only thing that this doesn't have is the link to core and supporting activities. So that, once again, can be done at the end of the year, once we've sort of allocated what the experiments were for the year. Now, the way to make this stronger is to capture, in more of a sample. So let's look at a very detailed 1 month, or even 1 week, what they actually did, and record in detail every hour, like say taking photos, emails, reports, meetings, minutes, any emails, and getting a greater level of detail around that week, and then seeing what that reflects the whole year of activity. Now, if the benchmark that I think the AHA would want us to aspire to is in an excellent level, so that's really every day, let's go and record how many hours of R&D, how many hours of other, detailed description of the activities, and then if we scroll across, we actually link it to the core and supporting activities. So that's the benchmark that we need to get to. Ideally, what we want to get to is probably a grade level. So record the week's activities, how many hours, and then also do a sample month. So is 74%, or just say we assumed it's 80 or 90% of the whole year. If we went and did a sample month, is that reflective of what we said at the end of the year? So we can do a sample month. Let's go and look at, for the month of May, every day, the R&D person would go and record what they were doing that day and keeping a lot more detailed information around that. So there's a few examples between poor and really good for timesheeting to keep. Another option to go and do some very detailed samples. So either a week or a month or whatever is reflective of how your business is running, and record that activity, and then any other supporting activity like test runs, experiments, any meetings, any meeting minutes, any notes, any emails, photos. I love to hear about mistakes that happen throughout the way. That gives a good indication of R&D. So anything you can do to capture a greater detail, that's going to look good for your timekeeping and your justification for your R&D.